Hello, and welcome back to Play of the Game, the limited gameplay podcast where we actually play the games. I'm Ryan,
I'm Jason.
and we are back with another Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sealed episode. We're actually playing with the same qualifier play and deck that we talked about last week, that complicated board state with Shredder and a bunch of weird combat math, and our opponent may be burning us out from 13. We've got a little bit of a simpler spot here, but before we get into it, before Jason describes it, just to remind everyone how this podcast works. If you're listening audio only, we are going to link out to the spot that we're talking about, the 17 lands log that I have pulled up, link to this exact moment in the game, and this is what we're going to be talking about for the whole episode. So what you can do if you're not able to watch the video either on YouTube or Spotify is go to that link, look at the spot, download it, mentally screenshot it, and then come back and listen to the rest of the podcast with that context in mind. So, Jason, do you want to break down the board state and the, I guess, hand state that we're looking at, which is one of the major factors here?
Yeah, so right now, this is very early in the game. Our turn two, we've been on the draw, and our opponent has made one play. So I think they mulliganed. It looked like they have so few cards in hand. How many? They mulliganed to
Yeah.
5. Yeah. Our opponent has mulliganed to 5. On turn one, they played a black-white tap land, the gain land. We played a swamp. On turn two, they play the forest and cast Dream Beavers. That's the 1/1 flying. When it enters, you drain for 1 and scry 1.
Constructed
So one of the
staple
best,
Dream Beavers.
yeah, one of the best sneak enablers in the set. They scry to the bottom if that matters. And then on our turn, we've untapped. We've played our plains as our second land for turn, and we have a few choices actually. So our hand, so our opponent has 3 cards only in hand. They multi 5. They play the 1-drop on turn 2. Our hand, we have 7 cards after playing our land. We have one more land. Our third land drop is a plains. We have a plains and a swamp in play. We have 4 removal spells. Uneasy Alliance, that's the pacifism that you can pay 5 to make to exile the thing and make a ninja. We have Dimensional Exile, that's just basically ossification, if you remember that card. It's like an O-ring that's attached to a land, but basically it's a 2-mana O-ring. It only hits creatures, I guess. We have Make Your Move, that's the 3-mana disenchant or kill something with power 4 or greater. And Grounded for Life, that's the thing that kills something if it's tapped for 2 mana, if it's untapped for 5 mana. Then, in addition to those 4 removal spells and that 1 land, we have 2 black 2-drops. The Splinter, the 1/3 that has Sneak for 1, and the 1/3 mana with Sneak for 1 that gives your other ninjas +1/+1, and Tunnel Rats, that's the 2/2 that can return from your graveyard if you pay 5. So yeah, that is what our hand looks like. So basically, the main decision here, well, theoretically there's a couple more decisions, but the big decision point here is: do you remove their 1/1 or do you play your own 2-drop?
Yeah, and this is sort of a classic limited situation that comes up a lot where you have, it's turn 2, you're going to play your 2-drop, you have to choose which 2-drop you're playing, or maybe instead you want to use your removal spell on their early play. And that is not often correct, because usually you want to keep removal spells for more impactful plays later on, but I think there's something pretty particular going on in this game and this format that is making the removal spell look like a much more viable play. So yeah, do you want to talk about that? Why are we considering casting this pacifism here?
Yeah, or one of the other ones. It's not obvious
one of the
which
other
one.
ones. This is true. Yeah, we could, I guess,
um,
leave up Grounded for Life, maybe.
Yeah, or even play Dimensional Exile. But either way, the reason why we would want to remove this 1/1 is, of course, that it's a sneak enabler, right? There's a bunch of cards in the set that have sneak that get cheaper when you cast them by returning a card, like a creature, an attacking creature to your hand, or get value in some way. Obviously, sneaking off of this Dream Beavers itself is also represents value, right? Because you get to replay it and get another drain and another scry. Um, So yeah, like removing the stream beavers, especially when they've mulled to 5, might like legitimately represent some like awkwardness, right? You could imagine maybe they have something that costs 4 to cast but sneaks for 3, and it might be a huge deal that they can't sneak it next turn. And like you've delayed them by at least a whole turn on that, and maybe they don't even draw their 4th land. Again, they're on the mull to 5. Maybe their hand is awkward in some ways, right? Also, getting more scries if they sneak something in and pick up this Dreamweavers can help them make their hand less awkward on the mulligan. So that's a lot of compelling reasons to get rid of the Dreamweavers, certainly.
I even think there's like a more particular reason, which is the common black sneak payoff, I guess you would call it, not really enabler, which is Oroku Saki Shredder Rising, which I will pull up here because I think it is very relevant to this board state where they've mulliganed.
I'm not as familiar with this, so this didn't immediately come to mind, but yeah, like this is definitely the premier example of how we could get punished.
Right. So this card sneaks for 1 and a black, so they already have that even if they don't hit their 3rd land drop. And what it does when it hits you is it draws a card and you lose a life. So that sounds pretty good when our opponent is on 3 cards and on a mulligan. We would really prefer them to not be able to get that off because it would mean not only that they draw an extra card, it would also mean that they're threatening where, next turn if we play out another 2/2, let's say we want to attack with our 2/2, right? Like otherwise we're not doing very much with it. Then they play a removal spell, they attack, they draw another card. Like we're starting to fall, if not behind, they're starting to certainly catch up in terms of cards and are maybe even ahead on board. Obviously, we have some things in our hand that could deal with that, right? Like we have a bunch of 1/1 removal, so if we really wanted to, we could just untap and cast like a Grounded for Life on the 3/1 and just say you drew 1 extra card, but that's where the buck stops. But still, we'd prefer them to not even be able to do that. So I think most of the time, right, you want to default to playing your 2-drop, and I think there's still a pretty strong default towards that here, right? Like even if it's a common, it's still not that likely that they have this one particular common, although more likely given that, they mulled to 5, they kept the Dream Beavers probably in their opening hand, despite it not really being a card that you want on a mull to 5 in general, because it sort of represents like a little bit less than a card's worth of value costing 1. I think like it's pretty reasonable to read them on some kind of sneak payoff, and this is probably the most likely one that they could have, given that it's a common and it would be really good for them here, so it makes sense for them to kind of plan their opening sequence that way. But I don't know, like it's still weird to go ahead and, I was saying this card doesn't represent a total full card of value, to just go ahead and slam our removal spell down on it right away. Like, do you think there's a reasonable case for playing the 2-drop or a 2-drop, depending?
I think there's no reason. Okay, I'll jump ahead a little here. I think there's no reasonable case for playing a 2-drop, and I think there's like many factors that point me towards wanting to remove their 1/1. First of all, you say it's not worth a full card, and like like to some extent that's true. Like it's only a 1/1, but like I feel like sometimes like it's easy to get like trapped or like tricked by this like notion of like what is or isn't worth a full card, right? Like there are things that matter other than just like raw card advantage in a game of Magic, right? And like we're already like up quite a few cards on them right now. Like not only are we up quite a few cards on them from the fact that they mulled to 5, but also like the like a lot of our cards are good at trading with their cards because they're removal spells, right? So like we're probably pretty good at winning this game if it comes down to a battle of attrition, right? A battle of like literally trading cards for cards.
Removal spells turn things into small games, and if we're way ahead on total number of rectangles in circulation, then we are going to win those small games, basically.
Yeah, and like basically, like I don't think that we need to be super concerned about like the card quality of what we're trading with, right? Like if instead our hand was like like a couple more lands over 2 of these removal spells, yeah, then I would think like, okay, maybe I need to like save this removal to deal with the threats that like really matter. But I think that like we are good enough on like how much, first of all, how much removal we have. Like it doesn't, I don't care at all about like wasting removal on this 1/1 because like it's like we have so much, and honestly a 1/1 flyer like that will peck in for some points of damage, right? That does like represent something, right? And I would rather not fall behind on other like axes of the game, like tempo, or letting them like get more board presence on board, or like attack our life total more, right? Like I just think that this 1/1 attacking our life total is a more likely wave to like more likely thing that might be relevant than like, oh, we like spent a card dealing with their card that maybe we didn't need to deal with, right? In some cases.
This is sort of a little bit of a theory detour, but I find that very interesting and maybe something to apply in other cases where if you're ahead, you are sort of incentivized to try to maintain your aheadness on all of the like resource axes, like life, mana, and cards, right? And so you're saying, right, if they're behind, but they have one axis that they have a chance of winning on, they're actually not as behind as if they're like slightly but clearly behind on all of the axes of the game.
Yeah, yeah. Like this is kind of like the inverse, or like the complement of
Playing to
the
your outs.
kind of thing where the kind of thing where, like, you know, when you're behind, you want to figure out what axis you want to fight on to try to win anyways, or like get ahead again, right? Like the axis they're behind on is cars, and it's like it's really hard for me to imagine them like recovering on that axis. So like probably the axis they want to fight on is some other axis, and therefore the thing that we should be like scared of them fighting on is some other axis, not on cards.
Yeah.
Right.
This makes sense. Like, obviously, the main concern is they could not be behind on cards if they have this one that, like, kind of catches them back up. But even beyond that, let's just say, I don't know, this card doesn't exist, but there was just, like, a 3/2 flyer that they could put in with Sneak for 3 mana or something, which means they could attack us, hit us for 3, and then like have another Dream Beavers in play, and suddenly they have a 4-turn clock in the air, and we're at something like, you know, 16, and that's just a 4-turn clock, and we might not actually be able to race them. I don't know. There's various things you could imagine that make it hard for us to win a race, even though with all of our removal, it's very easy for us to win like a resource game, like a card advantage kind of game.
Yeah, another part of this is our hand just isn't very good at, like, it's not that good at attacking and blocking, right? Like
at best we can create a attack for 3 right now, which is not very good. Okay, so I think I agree, like, in principle we want to use our removal spell on their 1-drop, even though it kind of looks at first glance like a very unintuitive play. Which removal spell should we use, I guess, is the question. You were mentioning all of the options at the beginning. I was kind of saying there's probably one that we're using, but why is that? Is that actually true? Should we consider everything? Like, what are the major upsides and downsides of all of this other removal?
Okay, so our 3 options are the Passivism, the Granted for Life, and the like O-Ring effect, right? The Passivism, the Raiden, and the O-Ring. To name 3 cards that are not the cards that are actually in front of us, but have similar effects. Anyways, so Uneasy Alliance, the Passivism. The main downside of that is they still have the card in play, so if there's anything in the set that like sacrifices a creature or picks it up or like disenchants our Passivism, they will get back their 1/1 and they can like continue to use it. But in terms of like, I probably wouldn't be that worried about the disenchants, right? Because like if they disenchant our removal spell, and
it's kind of like them just playing their 1/1 again.
Yeah, it's not like really like sneaking in the same turn, so that's probably not that worrisome. I don't know. I can't think of any like sacrifice outlets really in the set that are that concerning. I guess
there's that's like a major mechanic going on. Yeah, Ice Cream Kitty, but they can't even do that next turn because they won't have 4 mana, so we would have like warning time to try to deal with it. There's not a lot.
There are definitely some, but okay. There's like the 2 mana black removal spell that like has kicker sack a creature, but like that's not getting that much value out of it. So I think probably
I
we
also
don't need to
think
worry
the other
too
notable
much
thing,
about
right, is like the main downside of this uneasy alliance is that when we cast it, we either give them the opportunity to earn back their creature or a rectangle in play that they get to use for some kind of sacrifice thing, right? That's everything you were describing. However, if we assume that we're casting this uneasy alliance at some point during the game, that is still going to be true no matter what we use it on, and the mode of earn back their creature probably less appealing if they're earning back a 1/1 flyer versus some other card that costs more mana and is like more impactful, right? So
Yeah.
in some sense, at least with that option of them dealing with the uneasy alliance, this might be the best target for us to use that card on, because them earning back their 1/1 flyer is not a huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, this also is something that then like changes with like what exactly is in the format, right? Like if the card Village Rites was in the format, right? If there was some cheap way to punish us, but like some cheap sack outlet that would punish us for pacifying their creature, then doing it early might be worse, right?
Yes.
Like because like something
We
like
want to
Village Rites
strand
would be
that
something
card
that
in
our
their
opponent
hand
would
until later if we like save the pacifism. Yeah.
yeah, like something like Village Rites, our opponent would love to cast that in this spot, right? It would like help them like dig to more cards, maybe hit their land drops if they maybe are missing them, right? But there isn't something like that in the set. The best thing, the closest thing to that is Ice Cream Kitty, which is like a card that's not that good, I don't think, and also like pretty expensive to activate. So like we don't need to worry about that. So downsides on that Uneasy Alliance pretty small. Grounded for Life. The downside is we have to wait to their turn to cast it. We have to wait until they attack to cast it. At least they can't sneak because we can cast it before the blocker step, in which case they
Very
can't cast
important
sneak
to know when to cast it in arena so that you don't get blown out.
Yes. But like I don't know, you could imagine some way that they could blow us out with this. I I can't actually think of one off the top of my head, but like I'm sure there's something.
There's
Um,
like a hexproof indestructible trick that exists.
I thought that was only
Unclear if
for
we
turtles.
care about that. Well, it costs one less if it targets a turtle, I think, but it just costs one in a
Okay.
green otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah. So they could do that, but then they're trading that card for a removal spell, which is gonna happen at some point anyway, and it being on the Dream Beavers that they're gonna return to their hand, probably if they're using it for sneak, like maybe that's fine. The counter doesn't get used, that kind of thing.
But also, it's in the counter on a flying creature. A 2/2 flyer is like a lot more threatening than the 1/1 flyer, so it's
True.
also kind of
True.
bad there.
Many factors.
The final one, the O-ring. Like the downside is they can kill it and get back their thing. But it sure is ETB on like the Uneasy Alliance. Again, like I don't know if I'm that concerned by that. I guess.
I think the main thing is more thinking about like how are we using these removal spells on later creatures,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
That's
like,
the biggest
none of these downsides are that big. But like it's good. It's good to think through them and like like you said, the main thing is like opportunity cost, right? If we use one now, we won't have it for later.
The upside to using the Grounded for Life is that later on it might cost 5 to kill a creature, and so we're kind of getting more mana out of our hand on average when we use it to kill the Dream Beavers. The upside of Dimensional Exile, I guess, a little bit less clear, right? Like that doesn't let them get back the Beavers, maybe, but we don't have that for a future creature, and this is like the most unconditional removal spell we have in our hand, I would say. And then the upsides of the Uneasy Alliance are basically just that like it's the worst removal spell in our hand in a certain sense because it's like the least unconditional, given that it doesn't really deal with utility creatures that don't need to attack or block to get value
like
unless we spend
last
7
week's
mana.
Episode where we needed to exile their 7/5 that had an Uneasy Alliance on it because it was going to deal us some damage.
Yeah. Dimensional Exile would have been better than the pacifism in that game for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think it's at least a question. I don't think we're using the Dimensional Exile. I think that's pretty clear. I think it's at least a question of whether we want to use this Grounded for Life instead of the pacifism, just to like
Clean pacifism.
We're not playing a bunch of lands. Like we don't have many land drops this game, and so I don't know, maybe we want to get the expensive removal spell out of our hand just in case there's like a really important creature that has vigilance or something that we want to deal with.
Here's how I would here's the tiebreaker that I'm using to say I would use Uneasy Alliance instead of Grounded for Life. Our hand is fairly reactive, right? We're not really like attacking that much. Grounded for Life is better when you're reactive because it's an instant, right? Like you can cast it like theoretically during your opponent's turn, like during combat to like being like, oh, surprise, you attacked and thought that like these things would get through, but it actually like one of them is going to die now. Whereas like Uneasy Alliance is a better proactive card, right? The way that is better than Grounded for Life is that you can just reach out and kill a blocker, right? Like you can make a blocker not block. Whereas Grounded for Life, it costs 5 to do that, right? A lot more.
Yeah.
So given that, the shape of our hand is like kind of reactive, kind of defensive, right? Like we have some cheap creatures, but they're not that aggressive as creatures go, and we have a lot of removal, right? So I just expect us to continue to be in a more defensive position. So I think Grounded for Life is likely to be better later than Uneasy Alliance, but I don't know. Things can change. This is just like what I'm using to tiebreak this.
Yeah, I think this is very much a case of like, do whichever one your intuition says is better, and it's close enough that you're probably not going to be that punished. And like, even if you are punished, it's really not clear how to take information away from that, because maybe there was an equally bad other punish that they just didn't happen to have, or maybe they even had both. We don't know. It's really hard to say. I think it's close enough that like in the moment, especially when you're playing a match, you just like pick one, pick the best, pick whatever feels like the best one and do it. But it can be very hard to identify those situations because, as we kind of discovered last week, even in a game state where you think you understand everything going on, you might actually have a reasonable chance to kill your opponent. That's certainly not the case here, but like there can be things that you don't consider, and it is genuinely very hard to confidently say this is an easy or a very, very close decision in many situations in Magic. But I do think this one falls into that where, you know, play the one you think is best. If someone played Grounded for Life, I agree. My intuition says Uneasy Alliance, and that is in fact what I played in this situation. But if someone played the Grounded for Life and had some kind of rationalization for it, I would be like, sure, I can't say that you're wrong. And yeah, the what happened this game, we ended up winning pretty easily. It took a while because our clock was pretty slow, but we just had infinity removal for everything they did. They did end up playing an Orokusaki at one point, so probably that was in their opening hand.
Also, they ended up playing a New Generations technique, which is also really funny to me as a punish for like if
Which
you
one is
hadn't
that?
killed their 1/1. That's the explosive vegetation. They could have attacked with their one if they had a third land drop. They could have attacked with their 1/1.
This one.
And snuck in explosive vegetation, which is like probably pretty good for them.
That's a pretty good punish. Yeah, honestly, that might even be better than Orokusaki.
I'm not sure it's better than Orokusaki. Maybe it lines up better against our hand if they have good follow-up. It didn't look like they had good follow-up, but
yeah, they did not. They kind of flooded. So yeah, pretty easy game overall. But I think notably, like, if I hadn't been heads up enough to not just like slam out my 2-drop and instead be like, I actually need to kill this Dream Beavers to cover the kind of bad case scenarios, which could be really easy to do for someone on autopilot, I think this would have been a significantly tougher game. So these early decisions, not being asleep at the wheel and autopiloting, and instead being like, okay, I actually recognize in this situation I want to use my removal spell on their 1-drop that they just played, is pretty important. Like that is, I think, what separates players who win at, you know, decent rates versus players who win at significantly above the population rates. So yeah, thought this was an interesting spot. Not the most complex one, but we want to throw a simple one in every now and then, and still there's plenty to talk about even with those. So yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. And yeah, you can find me at r-condon.bsky.social, and you can find Jason at
JasonILTG everywhere. You should also go read this one's Patreon articles.
That you can do. It's linked on my Blue Sky. You can definitely find them there. And yeah, until next time, everyone, go out and make some good plays.